We are recording. This is the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum Oral History Project. This is Lou Richmond. It's the 15th of January, 2004. I'm Hannah Nordhaus, and we are at Rocky Flats in building 060 in a conference room somewhere. I don't know what room number.
112.
So to start out, if you could just give me a little personal background, where you grew up, what your parents did, where your education, and how you ended up in this field.
Okay. Well, I was actually born in Boulder, Colorado, but raised in Lafayette. My parents lived in Lafayette, and the only nearest hospital was Boulder, so I'm a Boulder community baby. My dad, prior to the war, was a welder on the ships in Washington, the state of Washington, and then when he went into World War II, pretty much did his service there of time, and then returned back to Lafayette and continued raising the family. Became a plasterer and did that for about 25 years. Moved on to construction of a different sort on a drilling outfit, and which I worked with him for a while just prior to coming to Rocky Flats. He retired from there and has been retired ever since. My mom opened up the Kmart store in Boulder when it first opened up in Boulder, Colorado, and stayed there for a number of years until she retired. And now she's spends all her time volunteering at the Lafayette Community Senior Center. And I have two sisters, which both have worked at Rocky Flats. One of them still does. With my sisters, and myself, we all met our spouses out here.
All three of you?
Yes.
My gosh.
And all three spouses were employees. My oldest sister has retired. She only worked here for a few years. My brother-in-law worked here as a battalion chief for probably almost 30 years, I guess. And the other sister is still on site, and she's got about 34, 35 years in. Her husband also works here. He's got about 20 years in. Met my wife here. She had about 15 years in, and I've got 33 years.
So, I was going to say, so did you decide to come to Rocky Flats when it was time to meet a wife? It sounds like it took you some time to meet her.
It took some time to meet her, but no, for the most part, neighbors that worked out here, friends, not counting the relatives prior to me coming on site. That's pretty much what brought me out here. I was in the construction field with my dad, and it was time to start my family growing and move along. And
so you had first heard of Rocky Flats then because of your sisters?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it was quite a large employer in your personal community.
Lafayette, Erie, Louisville, Broomfield, portions of Boulder, are all pretty much Rocky Flats employees. Large portions of the community. Those that weren't working at Rocky Flats were probably working for the cities or in the coal mines in the early days, or retired from the coal mines. In fact, the next door neighbor where I grew up started out here in March of '51.
Wow.
So.
And had he been in the coal mines?
Prior to that, I'm not sure if he had been in the coal mines or not, but when he started out here, I never realized he worked out here until I actually came on site and came across him.
So it sounds like it was it offered an opportunity. Was it a lot higher pay or safer working conditions than what people were doing before?
It's always had a great safety record, I guess, in that aspect. As far as the work went, it was more employment. It was more secure employment than most of the construction, even though construction was still in a booming period in the 70s, through the 80s and into the 90s. But Rocky Flats been a fairly stable work environment for a lot of people. A lot of families are growing through here.
Right. So what year did you come? And
May 4th, 1970.
May 4th, 1970.
1 year after the fire.
Okay.
Fire was May 11th, 1969. I was hired as a decon worker to help clean up the fire.
And decon means decontamination.
Decontamination. We would dress out in supplied air and survive air and full face respirators, half mask respirators, whatever the environment called for, and go in and scrub down and clean up the building from the fire from 1969. And basically I was hired as a temporary employee because when that work went away, my job was going away.
Did you, when you were hired, you knew what you were hired to do?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so you described in your notes, and I hope you'll describe
Yeah.
this again, how eerie it was to go to the building and see
Oh.
the coffee cups and the...
Yeah, it was really unusual going into 776, more than a year after the fire, and you would see calendars and coffee cups and everything from the people that had just been in there when they left work at the end of that day prior to the fire. And the fire didn't touch those areas, but there was still contamination and destruction around the area. But it was eerie to see those things undisturbed from the last time somebody had sat at that desk when it was actually under production. So, and then you'd look around the rest of the room and you'd see big piles of lead or melted glass and just tremendous amount of damage, and just it was an eerie feeling, but you knew you were there for a mission, and that was what really I think drove a lot of the work. Everybody knew what the mission was in the beginning.
And that was?
Well, the mission for us in Decon was to clean up the fire so we'd get back in production. And the mission of the plant site was production for the nuclear triggers, and to really help the free world, all in all. A lot of people don't believe that, but there's a lot of lives that were saved because of that. And yeah, we had to use it once, and maybe a couple times, but after that, it became such a threat that nobody ever used it again. Didn't have to. So the threat of having it saved the lives, and I think it postponed a lot of the eventual World War III type scenarios.
So when you went into the room, had there been other decon people there when before you got there, or had they just finally gotten it or to the point where they could?
We just got into the original fire area. When I first started in May of '70, initially we were cleaning up some of the supply fans on the second floor, and they were finishing up the exterior walls and actually getting ready to break into the original fire area of 776, which was actually near the border of 777 building back towards the molten salt area on the western side of the building. And they had firewalls put up to contain not only the fire but to contain the contamination. And once we went in, we were the first ones in there outside of fire patrols that had walked through just to make sure that there was nothing burning even to a year after.
Wow.
So we went in and started doing the cleanup. I was part of that team.
So what did it involve? You described what you were wearing. Were you mopping, sweeping?
You were scrubbing, mopping, cutting up dry boxes, cutting up equipment, walls that are inside there, rails, shielding, cleaning up the melted glass from the dry boxes, the lead that had melted off, bagging it all up and preparing it for off-site shipment to storage for waste, and cleaning up and scrubbing it, trying to get as much of the contamination off as you could, trying to recapture the material. But you would be, depending upon the level where you went in, some areas you didn't require nothing but a half mask, others were a full face mask, up to survive air or supplied air. And that's how you pretty much did business.
Were you nervous at all?
No. The management and supervision that we had were very, very knowledgeable. My impression that most of them at that point in time had been around the flats for a number of years and understood what was going on and knew how to do the cleanup and gave us very good instructions and had no fear of it. Once you learned the problems with contamination and knew how to deal with it and how to respect it, you never had a problem.
Were you ever contaminated?
Oh yes, yeah.
In that during that cleanup or later?
During that period. And I've had probably one or two other contaminations, but nothing significant, no big burdens or anything like that. I'm sure there's been some employees that received it, but for the most part, no. It's been a very safe portion of that period. I mean, everybody watched out for each other. It was the period of time when we went through 25 million man hours without a disabling injury. Every employee was involved with safety at that point.
Did you, when you were contaminated, were you aware of the moment it happened, or was it at the end of the day?
Sometimes you knew. If you had a glove come untaped, or you got a tear in your PPE, your personal protective clothing, you'd know that you got contaminated, and you'd go up and you'd get checked out, and you'd go out and you'd get your chances to clean yourself with Tide in a cold shower and try to get the contamination off. And if after about the third try you didn't get a chance, you got an opportunity to visit medical, and at that point in time they would certainly take care of you and get the contamination off.
I like what you said here.
Mm-hmm.
Until you've laid on the white porcelain
table. That's right. You truly have not lived at Rocky Flats. Till you've visited medical, been contaminated enough where they had to scrub you with Clorox on the white porcelain table they had up there, you have not experienced anything of Rocky Flats.
Now, when that happened, did you feel that, I mean, were you nervous, mad at yourself, whatever
No.
it was, or did you feel like you were part of, you finally made it?
You felt more stupid than anything. That you ended up, couldn't get the contamination off through the normal scrubbing, so you're going to medical and you're going to get the Clorox treatment on the little white table. And
sounds like fun.
well, it is, but it's an experience, and it's not a frightful experience. It's a good experience to understand that they were able to clean you up to the point where you could go home after that and get all the contamination off. And that was part of the safety program, where they actually took care of you. But until you've actually laid on there, you probably really haven't been at Rocky Flats.
Never been. And you never had any, you didn't have any lung pain in your lungs?
No.
Okay, so you worked cleaning up the fire for how long?
About a year and 3 months, something like that, and then the job started going away. We were finishing the duty. We were coming out of the supplied air and survive air and full face, and we were going to half mast, and so the job was winding down, and we'd actually cleaned up the majority of the burn area. And one of the foremen that I worked for had some past experience with the security force and said this would be a good place to go to. Oh. You want to put it on hold, or it's going to be overbearing?
It's going to be a long one? Yeah, I'll stop it.
Yeah.
So like get it on the table.
Okay. So, anyway, this foreman told me that I should transfer into the security force. He said at this point in time, he says a 20-year man working midnight shift did not have enough seniority to hold day shift. And it was true, because all of them were hired primarily in March of '51 through '53, and then a few hires in '56, and then it jumped to the '60s. But for the most part, majority of the people were hired in the early days, and with 20 years of service, they could not hold days. And he said, well, probably within 5 years, you could probably get on day shift. And it was almost to the day, 5 years later, that I transferred into security, I could have held 5-day days and actually been a day shifter and worked a normal shift.
Then you would have been in production.
No, I was still in security.
Oh, okay, this is for, so.
When I went
so
into
you said
security.
Go into security, but you don't expect to work days anytime.
Yeah.
Okay.
And after 5 years, I could have held about any shift I wanted on days in the security arena. There has been nothing but retirements from the time I got in the department until mine.
So, so how was that transition into the security team? Was it?
It was an interesting transition. I'd never shot a handgun in my life. I'd shot rifles before and stuff like that, but moving in to that arena, they really were looking for people that didn't have any law enforcement or military background. They didn't want to try to, what they would, I guess you would call now, break a bad habit. And really they weren't bad habits, they were just different attitudes towards security. Rather than a police department or a military background, it was strictly security. So they welcomed people like myself to come into the group because they could train us to what they needed us to know about security. And so we went through a massive amount of training, learned how to shoot, and all the orders are required for security. And I stayed in the department through my entire career after that. I took the uniform off in 1990 and started supporting security, but I was still in the group taking care of them. And,
so, I guess what was it, you know, did you feel a lot of responsibility being one of the people responsible for keeping the plant safe?
oh yeah, yeah. It's, as a security officer, an SPO, whatever you want to call them, they have a certain line of responsibility, and it's making sure that badges are checked properly and buildings are checked and locked up and et cetera. And then you have the supervision side the house who make sure that they do that. And when I transferred into management side the house, it changed a whole nother environment for me to realize that I was really part of the process to keep the flats safe and secure around the clock. And quite a bit of responsibility, but with it went a lot of satisfaction because you were working with the best of the people that you could ever find to work with. I mean, truly professional security force. They're human beings, they have fun, but they did their job 100%.
So what was your day-to-day? Were you assigned to one building when you started, or did you roam the plant, or how?
Well, once I got into security as a SPO, a security officer, or a security inspector at that point, you were assigned to any of the buildings. You could go anywhere. And actually I was trained on all the posts, on all the routes, and knew all the buildings, been in almost every room on plant site, every building on plant site. And then once you took the uniform off, then you went to a period of time when you worked basically out of 121 building, and you'd go out and visit the different posts and buildings, and if there was a problem in supervision, you'd go in and help take care of it. But, the years as a dispatch officer and a lieutenant were very good times, but the best, I guess the very best of my time in my career was 6 years as a captain. When you were the person they came to, you had the final say for the operation on shift. And a lot of responsibility, but it was sure a lot of fun.
So you tell them where to go, what to do, and
Yeah, I let them pretty much do their job. They knew their job.
so when would they come to you?
If they had a problem that they couldn't resolve, or if they needed guidance in an operation, I would go there and I'd take care of it. But for the most part, they would take care of it. You get a lot of announcements. Okay.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? ISS has completed testing of the fire hydrants east of Building 777. ISS has completed testing of the fire hydrants. Thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Water's back to normal.
Yes. So, yeah, you had a lot of responsibility. But when you're working with the best people, they know their jobs, you really don't have to do much for them. They pretty much knew what to do. If they had a problem, they brought it to you, you take care of it. And it's more a figurehead than anything, but you had the ultimate responsibility that anything that happened on shift fell on your shoulders. And
How big was the security force?
it varied. From the time I started, we were probably in the neighborhood around 200 to 250, and then it would fluctuate, and then it finally grew to right around 350, 360, something like that, and then now it's finally dwindled back down to a handful, around 80-some people, and
Then a lot of people left just recently when the plutonium left.
when they had the final shipments and everything was downgraded, we got all the material gone. Most of those people transferred to other sites in the security arena and are still doing the same type of work, just for different companies or different areas. A few retired, a few went on to go into new careers, but for the most part, the majority of them got new jobs at other sites in the security arena and were able to continue their career, which was good.
So I assume there's some people who were just assigned to a station to check badges. Were there people who roamed the buildings to make sure there wasn't anything?
In the early days, we had regular patrols. You had 2 or 3 people assigned to a guard post on the night shifts, and you'd go into a building and you would lock all the doors, check all the safes, empty all the burn, put up all the bulletin board announcements, make sure the whole building was intact and there was no problems, and then you'd come back an hour later and do it again, and do that throughout the night. And then they went to a couple every hours once we got the sprinkler system put on site, and then finally they got to about every 4 hours, and then kind of from there life as security started changing. We got out of more of the service organization and started actually doing strictly protection. Not that we didn't do protection in the beginning, we did all of that. We did protection and service. And I think it's finally coming back around to do more service also.
Services.
Well, just taking care of small little problems, helping people out if they don't know what to do, and if they get lost on site, or if they truly don't understand what the rules are. The security officers are taking the time to instruct them and help those people along and get us all to closure.
What was it like to be cleared for?
For 33 years?
Yeah. And not be able to
It was interesting to go through the clearance process. You have to identify everything about your entire life. Every month has to be accounted for. And it seems like that's a lot, but you look at from the time you leave high school, well, those are the first 12 years, so that's all accounted for. And it's just that period after there that you got to make sure that you've got it all documented. If you worked, where you worked, who your friends were, your neighbors were, relatives, and kept track of all that. And that was a little testing, trying to keep track of all those things. But once you got the initial forms filled out and you kept copies for yourself, it made the updates a lot easier. And you'd have an update every 5 years. So, but working with classified wasn't that hard. I mean, you were protecting national security stuff, and you knew certain things could be talked about, and you had a need to know, we talked about it. If they didn't have a need to know, we didn't talk.
Is it hard not to discuss that stuff with your family?
No, they understood. Especially within my family, because my sisters came from out here, my brother-in-laws, so everybody kind of knew.
But now, even though you worked at Rocky Flats, you couldn't actually talk about your jobs to each other, could you? Or?
In the early days, they didn't allow that at all. Later years, it wasn't as critical. You just didn't discuss anything that was classified. But your day-to-day activities, okay, I was working with this person and had problems, or I did that activity or whatever, was really a no, never mind. You just didn't get into the classified portions, I guess, of our operation.
And as a member of the security force, what would have been classified in your work?
Pretty much all the orders, how we did business, how many firearms we would have, what type of protection strategies we used, how we did responses, how many people you'd have on shift at a time, how many be gone,
So
any weaknesses, any strengths.
anything anyone would want to know if they were trying to get onto the
Yes.
plant site.
Mm-hmm.
And you ran a lot of drills?
Oh yeah, yeah, we did a lot of exercises. The early days, when I would call the early days for me, are the 60s and 70s, and going into the 80s, we had shift exercises that we conducted, and they went on fairly easy. I mean, you would do that on your own shift, and you would test the people, making sure of their responses, how they did business, if they came with all their gear, not with all their gear, or whatever. And you'd critique it after, and you would never really get down on anybody. You'd just say, you know, it might be better if you brought some more equipment with you next time. And they would learn from it. And it was growing for all of us, learning what we needed to do and to make the job better and safer and be more prepared. After the 80s, it got more organized, where we actually did security exercises, full force exercises. And in fact, it was my shift that took on DOE and changed how they did a lot of exercises years ago, and in the 80s, where we suited up an entire shift with electronic equipment. And usually there'd only been 10 or 12 people suited up. And that was the first time they'd ever suited up an entire operation.
And what was well, first of all, what's the electronic equipment?
This is Miles ESS equipment, where you'd actually have a laser attached to the end of the gun, and you'd shoot blank rounds. In between the activation of the trigger and the blank round going off, it would activate a laser that would hit a sensor that you had on your body, and it would detect whether or not you had a near miss or a hit. So it was fancy war games, so to speak.
So the electronic equipment was just for training exercises?
Just for training exercises, no other time.
And subsequently DOE started outfitting everybody with them?
That was the first time they'd actually outfitted an entire operation, and we took out their adversary team and their insider and never fired a round.
How'd you do that?
Well, they parked out in the middle of a parking lot in a van pool, and it was out of place. And the security inspector thought it was out of place because the van pools, they usually park in their reserved spots. And this van pool was parked out in the middle of the parking lot at 750. And he walked up and looked inside, and had 5 or 6 guys in it. And so he backed off and called in some more people, and they surrounded it, and people gave up inside, and we got some more information from one of their leaders and was able to take out the insider, and we were seconds away from taking out the rest of the adversary team that was on the outside perimeter of the fence. And DOE called it and said, you know, there's no way they can win. you've won the game, and we'd never fired a single round. The guys were so professional. It was you couldn't write a script that well.
Okay, so was this a plan? Did you know this was happening?
Mhm.
Was it a plan?
Yeah, this was a planned exercise.
And there was going to be people coming from the outside,
Sorry?
and then the insider was someone.
We never knew who they were until we actually got the notebook off of one of the guys, and then we knew exactly the whole scenario and was able to unravel it and deter them from doing any damage.
What was the scenario?
Basically, the scenario at that point was to have an insider, an employee, in one of the buildings, take some material, which was not real material, it was a mock-up material, and get it out the door and get it to an adversary who would get it over to another team who would take it clear off site. And they had a diversion area up in the 750 parking lot, and we broke the diversion area. That was the first van. And once we got the insider out, it just started unraveling for them, and they never had a chance to do anything at that point.
So was that fun, or I mean?
It was absolutely awesome. Highlight of my career.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. It truly was.
Wouldn't be as much fun if it hadn't been a game, though, I guess.
If it had been real life, no, I think it'd have been okay. Because in real life, I think the same thing would have happened. Absolutely. I mean, that's just the way the operation. I mean, they spent months trying to figure out this scenario, and it took us minutes to break it down.
For you.
Yeah.
So, there were never any incidents like that, though?
No, no. None through the history of the flats.
There were some nuns?
Two nuns.
And,
They made up badges that looked like our badges at Rocky Flats, and they were arrested, not for trespassing, they were arrested for falsification of a government ID.
but they weren't dressed as nuns when they came out?
No, they were regular everyday clothing, but they were sisters, and we'd seen them a lot after that, prior to and after, and they finally realized that they could try to sneak in, but they didn't realize that making a badge was against the law.
So how far did they got past the gate?
Yeah.
Did they drive, or?
At that point in time, there was no physical checks, it was all visual checks. So when they showed up, they were showing it against the sun, so the guard's looking out with his eyes facing the sun, and they came in through the the east road in the morning. So it's hard to see through the glass, and you do the best job you can, and you've got a lot of employees coming in time, and when they came in with a massive amount of people. But they didn't make it very far because they were detected right after they got in. And
How were they detected? So they came in?
as soon as they came in and got out of the vehicles, they were putting some signs and blood on one of the perimeter security fences, and they were detected immediately at that point, and apprehended and taken into custody and dealt with.
So they didn't have any real intention of getting much further, they just wanted to?
No, that's as far as they wanted to go.
Do some signs?
No, they were just trying to put on a show, I guess you might say, at that point.
What, was there any repercussions for the security force? Was there a sense that
No.
any backlash?
No,
You guys had?
they were doing their job. You consider the conditions and everything like that. Yeah.
Where did they get their badges?
They made them by themselves. They weren't big secrets. I mean, you could see employees. All you'd have to do is stand outside the gate, and you'd see people driving up. And some had their badges hanging from their mirrors, and others who protected them a little bit more. But it was not a hard thing to take a look and get an idea what a badge looked like, and even through the news media, you could probably pick up an idea what a badge looked like. So.
And were any processes changed after that?
A few. we started some more positive inspections. The outer gates were put in to do a physical badge swipe so that you could actually, badge was checked and verified that it was an authorized badge before we grant you access on the site.
So before that, they just flashed the badge?
Mm-hmm.
And you had
You just
somebody
hold it
that
up.
had to
Yeah.
read, a reader or something?
Yep, now they're actually reading them.
Well, since we're talking about nuns,
Mm-hmm.
why don't we talk about your experience with the protesters?
Ah, yeah. We had lots of fun with the protesters. Had hardly any time off during the August time frames because that was the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So they keyed upon those days. You couldn't have any vacation time prior to that period for almost a month and a half, and of course through that entire month of August. And then you would spend your entire weekend out here, many times. Work long hours. You do training prior to make sure that you were trained up to speed to handle demonstrations, riots or crowds or whatever the case may came up with. Performing arrests, get your arrest techniques fine-tuned, and then after a while that kind of died off. We still had the Sunday show-ups that would come up every Sunday and do a little prayer for Rocky Flats employees that we were doing the right job. And we'd go out and sit and watch them, and we dealt with them on a weekly basis. The little drummer boy would walk in about once a month from Boulder and spend his little march all the way from Boulder, Colorado to the West Gate, and then he'd hitchhike a ride back.
So you played the drums?
Yeah. He had a little, like a tambourine type thing, but a little drum that he pounded all the time out, and he ended up with the nickname the Drummer Boy.
Did you get to know the protesters? Did you
Not
talk
personally.
with them? No?
Not personally. We would talk with them and make some initial contacts and make sure that is this going to be a non-violent thing, and they were pretty much upfront. They would tell us, yeah, we're just here to pray for you. And then when you'd hit the big demonstrations in August, you would have more crowds, and you know you're going to have a little bit more. So you'd prepare for it. They had a lot of intelligence coming from that, so they would prepare for it. Upper management put a lot of feelers out into Boulder County and talked with the police departments and sheriff department and find out, okay, yeah, they're having a lot of meetings about the upcoming events, and we'd all prepare for it.
So you just being prepared is having a few more guards around and making sure that...
Oh yeah, you'd have almost twice a shift during those periods. But you do a lot of training prior to. And
a lot of training to how to deal with nonviolent...
The nonviolent and the violent people, and you'd practice your arrest techniques, handcuffing, riot patrol, get your squad formations worked out so that you were very professional and you knew what you were doing when you walked out on the line.
Were you nervous?
No. No. They had their rights, we had ours too.
What did you think about the protests and the protesters?
One reason we had the nuclear weapons was so they could protest. They had that freedom to do that. So having the nuclear triggers on plant site, being part of the nuclear weapons program, gave them that privilege, so they should be able to use it. So it didn't bother me at all. It'd been nice to have an August off once in a while, but didn't turn out that way.
Did you think, well, I guess you said you didn't have a lot of personal contact with them.
No.
And were they respectful to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You'd have, once in a while you'd have one that wouldn't be very respectful, but they were few and far between. for the most part, they understood why we were there, and we understood why they were there, and mutual grounds.
And did you have to, you did say that some of them got violent and you did have to arrest them, or
Mhm.
there were arrests from time to time?
Oh yeah, there were arrests from time to time. More so around the August time frames, around the 6th and the 9th, you'd have more arrests, but through the rest of the year, you'd rarely have it. When the 2 nuns came on site, well, it was not during that period, it was during the summer, so it was a little different.
Question about, and did the protest make your job more challenging than you
Oh,
would
yeah.
have liked it?
Yeah.
Did you find it interesting, or?
It was
annoying,
interesting.
or-
Yeah, it was annoying. It was interesting because it brought you into another realm of work, because you were working close with local law enforcement agencies. You built a lot of alliances, a lot of friends, understood their job, understood your job more. Actually got to work with Jefferson County and Boulder County and the State Patrol, and found out, you know, we're one big happy family, so to speak. Yeah, we were the terminology of the night watchman, the fat night watchman, but we really weren't. They understood that after that. We're a well-trained force and did our job, and they knew their job, and we do ours, and we worked well together.
Were you around for the FBI raid?
Yes, it was.
Tell me about your experience with that.
That was a interesting day when they showed up. Otto Algrim was working the outer gate. I distinctly remember him making a phone call up and saying, "Hey, we've got a problem out here. We've got the EPA and the FBI, and they've got a subpoena. They want to come on plant site." And they needed to talk with the general manager. And so we made a call. At that point, you never called the general manager directly. You went through your chain, through the management, through the director. And once we got through Ron Newby, our manager, and went to Ed Young, who was the director of security, we told him, "Look, we had a little problem out there. We need to get it resolved real fast." And he said, "Okay." And he said, so we met him over at 111 by the general manager's office, and we took them all out to the gate, and they were served with a subpoena, and pretty much allowed the FBI to come on site, and they pretty much had the run of the place at that point, between the FBI and the EPA.
Were you instructed to let them do whatever they wanted, or were you
Pretty much.
patrolling and just not, but there's suddenly strange outsiders there, right?
Very strange outsiders who really didn't understand our operation, but we worked with them, got past it, got through the whole operation. After a week or two, things really calmed down, and everybody knew what was going on, and worked with them and tried to make their job easier along with our job easier too.
Did you have to escort them from place to place, or they just?
They had free access, complete free access.
So what did you think it was justified, or there was any merit to the charges?
No, I don't think they were justified. I think they were on a witch hunt. They were giving them some information that they thought was valid information, and they did some surveillances that they thought were showing some inconsistencies, and decided, okay, they were going to attack Rocky Flat, so to speak. And we're still here. We are closing, but we're still here.
Was it weird to, I mean, there's a lot of people with guns
Yeah.
on the property, which I assume people weren't allowed to have except for the security folks.
Yeah, but they all had their firearms, so they were able to bring their firearms on site. They had full access, and that was hard for the security side of the house to swallow that up and allow it to happen. But once we understood what the rules were and who had access, who didn't, pretty much worked out.
How did you feel when the mission changed? Production stopped?
From a production site to a closure site?
Yeah.
Initially, it was disappointing. I guess we knew it was coming somewhere down the line. It was just a matter of time. Having worked through the mission of production, and now we're changing into a mission of closure, and that became a very unpopular word, I guess, on plant site, being called enclosure, but there was a lot of total denial throughout the site, thinking it'll never ever happen. It would be 50, 60 years. As time progressed, people became the more realistic understanding that they knew it was going to close. It was time for it to close. The era had finished. It was time to realize that our jobs were all coming to an end. And let's change our focus and figure out, okay, if we're going to close it, let's close it the right way. Let's do this all the right way. And I think the majority of the people stepped up to that plate. There were still a few that were in denial, and there still are a few in denial.
It's about to be harder now with everybody leaving, right?
Well, they need to take the realization when buildings are dropping down around behind you and beside you and in front of you, buildings that you worked in, visited in, walked routes in, are gone. Makes you realize, yeah, it is closing. And it's closing very fast.
Are you, do you think that it's, how do you feel about the cleanup of it? Do you think it's being done well and responsibly?
As far as well and responsibly, in some aspects, I think it's a little fast, and I understand that they have deadlines to make. And I think they should have taken more realistic deadlines. I think they've pushed the envelope very much for the early closure. Personally, my belief in that is they need to throw out the anchor and slow it down a little bit. Make sure they've got the job done completely. We've gone so fast that we're overlooking the little small bits and pieces of the operation. Make sure that everything is taken care of all the way through.
Have you seen things being overlooked? Have you witnessed it, or are you just getting that sense?
No, I've seen it. I've seen it. Personally seen it. And it's not good. I see a lot of destruction of good usable property and equipment that could be utilized. And in fact, when I really changed my career from a support activity to a closure activity, I started trying to get rid of all the equipment I can, the security, all the fun toys we got, and get it into the right hands. And we've done that. We've gotten rid of the biggest portion of our equipment. Have gone to other DOE sites or local law enforcement agencies that could utilize the equipment. So I've done my piece, I guess, to help that and watch that things just didn't get thrown in the trash.
You mentioned that this is the end of an era.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission of working and producing these triggers that
Mm-hmm.
kept the world peaceful. Have your opinions about producing nuclear weapons changed over the years, or
No.
since this era has ended?
The era for Rocky Flats has ended. The era of nuclear weapons has not. We still need them. We need the deterrent. We need the insurance policy, is what I'd call a nuclear weapon. It's an insurance policy that we don't get attacked on our property anymore, as they did in 9/11. I think the threat should have been there from 9/11. And if they don't stop the terrorism, we will use the nuclear weapon. They killed a lot of Americans, just as the Japanese did on Pearl Harbor. That's what activated the nuclear program. And we were attacked, and we retaliated. We retaliated in a different way after 9/11, but I think we need, the era of nuclear weapons is still there. It's still needed. We need the insurance policy it provides us, that we're all safe and we can all live our life the way we want to live it.
You think it's good that it's not at Rocky Flats anymore, or do you think that?
Well, that's I was anticipating a long career out of here. It's sad to see it go because it's taken a lot of jobs away from the Denver area. A lot of families have grown up here. 50 years, 50 plus years of employment at Rocky Flats. There's a lot of families that have had their parents work out here, their kids, their grandkids work out here. And now they're going to be dispersed to the wind to find another career or another area to work. And they're going to lose the awesome sight in the mornings of waking up and seeing those beautiful Rocky Mountains. And it's because we won't have Rocky Flats. Good or bad? Yeah. I hate to see it go because I think a lot of jobs go with it. The facilities are old, but they can always be refurbished. And the facilities that we're moving the operation to aren't new facilities. So they really didn't gain a lot by it other than just the political atmosphere.
What about the community? Then do you think that there was?
The community hasn't accepted the fact that they're going to lose a lot of employment from Rocky Flats. If they just think it's the employees, they need to think again. You've got the loaf of bread, the gallon of milk, the hot dogs, the gas, the newspaper, the chairs they buy, the tables they buy, the cars they buy, the homes they buy. They won't be buying them no more. In our regular production, we were around 5,000 to 6,000 people. We bumped up to around 8,000 or more during the closure, and it's dwindling back down. But when it all goes away, that's 6,000 jobs plus that have walked away from the Denver metropolitan area. That's sad.
What about the public perception that it's not safe for the community? What did you believe this was the case?
That it's good for the community?
That people were worried about environmental pollution.
My family's out there. My grandkids are out there. Why would I allow anything to be released that would harm them as an employee? And I'm just one, but I know all the employees feel the same way for the most part. Why would they allow a release of contamination that would hurt their family?
What about accidental releases?
You can have an accident anywhere, anytime. Doesn't have to just be Rocky Flats. Yeah, it's dangerous stuff, but basically even after the '69 fire, they realized they didn't have any major releases, so. Even during the worst fire of the century, it was contained.
So
They couldn't say that about Conoco when it blew up. Or when you've had a major spill off of a chemical truck that's driving through the metropolitan area, releasing a plume. Not much different.
So how did you feel about the way safety issues were talked about in the media?
They don't understand it. I don't think the employees understand it. Safety has taken a total turn, I guess, in the long run from the days when I was hired, where safety was every employee's responsibility. And if you talk to the managers and you talk to upper management, they say, yeah, safety is everybody's responsibility. They talk it, but they don't live it. When I started out here, we lived it. And it's slowly over the years changed. And that's the sad part about the flats. Is we went from an extremely good safety program to one that we're saying we've got a good safety program, but we really don't live it. And that's me. That's just how I live and how I believe in, I guess. And being here 33 years, I've seen it.
Do you think there are any weaknesses in your security at all?
No. None at all. They're the most professional people, even though we don't have the numbers we had before, or a lot of the other stuff that we need to do or have had done in the past. You still have the individuals who go home every night and realize that they did their job and they protected the plant and they were protecting the employees and the equipment and property at Rocky Flats. And it's still intact.
Were there any, I'm assuming there have been women on the security force?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did they join at a certain, were there more now than there were in the beginning, and was there any?
Well, the very beginning was, had to be in the 70 time frame, early 70s. I was still walking around. Pat Palmer and Pat Brown were the first female guards.
Did they have an easy transition?
I think they did. They may not have thought they did. They were welcomed into the operation, and they did their job as everybody else did. It's grown over the years. The number of females have come up a long ways. They all still do their job. We've got one that has about 25 years out here right now. Yeah. She does an excellent job. Yeah. So I think they've earned their place in the history of Rocky Flats. They really have, in the security arena. They've done a good job. Couldn't have done it without them.
Well, anything else you want to add?
Nothing I can think of.
Okay, do you want to just
No.
hold up some of that stuff and see what that is?
I just picked up out of a building. It's an old D-Tex clock that we had. Some of the patches worn throughout the period. And this is all the patches that have been worn, and these are actually being given to the museum. Mm-hmm.
Great.
I was able to pick up a book that somebody had returned to the plant a long time ago. It was one of the early retirement books from the flats. And it just has a bunch of the original pictures and stuff. We'll be given that, and I've got some demonstration books, and I'm going to go through some of the photos of those and see what they can use or not use, or if they don't have them, or if they already have them, that's fine too. If they need a little information, I'll tell them what I remember of the days of the demonstration and what happened on those days.
Great.
But it's been a good career. I've enjoyed it. And I think all the people have. And actually the security force outside of management is the oldest department at Rocky Flats. There was management and then there were guards. First building really was a guard shack.
Wow.
Then they started building everything else.
What were they guarding?
Just the land and the protection to make sure nobody got in and saw what was going on. So they've done a good job since March of '51.
Okay, well, thank you very much for participating, and I'm going to turn it off now.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.